the worst product I ever used, and how selecting the right product makes all the difference. All on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, here discussing all things pest. Hey, welcome to the new podcast, the new Pest Geek Podcast, and it's also the first podcast of the new year. Welcome to 2018. That's right, folks. This is the new and improved Pest Geek Podcast, and we're going to be getting into a bunch of new things this year. We're going to have a bunch of guest hosts on this podcast, and we're going to be discussing a lot of things that we have not been discussing before. So I want to thank you for tuning in, for being part of this podcast, and for welcoming me into your audio world, into your iPhones, into your Androids, into your vehicles. Every single day, we're going to be producing a new podcast. That's right. We're doing a 7-day-a-week podcast, the only 7-day-a-week podcast in the industry devoted to educating, training, and informing you, the pest control professional. So I want to thank you for making the 2017 just an amazing year, and 2016 was a great year. So this is like a great bottle of wine. It just keeps getting better. So thank you for all that you've done for us. And now I want to be discussing with you the worst product that I ever used. And if I must be honest with you, this is very difficult to admit as a pest control professional. But the worst product that I ever used was the one that I either purchased for the wrong pest, misapplied it, or didn't use it in the way that it was intended because I didn't do my research. That's right, folks. What I'm saying is there really is no such thing as a really terrible product in the pest control industry. I've never used a product that failed to deliver what the manufacturer had promised on the product. It usually has been that I, as a professional, did what most people do in the industry. Asked somebody else what they're using to control blank, and then just went and applied it without understanding what pest I'm really dealing with, how that pest behaves, understanding how that product behaves, and understanding anything about that product. And I basically ended up wasting a lot of time and a lot of money on something that did not work. But it didn't work, not because that just wasn't the right product to use for that, but because somebody else was using it. And let's face it, we all go on Facebook, we all go on groups, we all go somewhere, we all meet at the conventions, we all meet at the distributors, and we ask, hey, what are you using to control blank? And somebody says, I'm using this. And you go and you buy a bottle and you just apply it. And, how are you applying it? What are you applying it on in specifically in what area? We don't ask a whole lot of questions. And I'm going to show you on this podcast what I did. Because when I started out as a newbie, I went through a lot of headaches because I didn't have any good training. Nobody really ever trained me. I've said this before. This is one of the reasons I do this podcast and why I experience it in groups. I experience it everywhere that people are just not getting any real good training. And a lot of people are not getting answers because they're not asking the right questions, and they're not asking the right people, and they're not doing their homework. And that is the number one reason right there. People are being lazy. You're being lazy, not asking the right questions, knowing what to ask, and not going in and doing your own homework. You want somebody to tell you, I'm using product A, I'm using bifenthrin, I'm using it on this, and I'm applying it 1 ounce per gallon, and I'm showing up every 2 months, and that's it. That's what you want to hear. That doesn't make you a professional. All right. You wouldn't accept that from anybody in the industry, in any other industry. You wouldn't accept it from your AC guy. You wouldn't accept it from your doctor. You wouldn't accept it from anybody. Why is it that we do that in this industry? And then we wonder why people think we don't know anything. We have to basically do our homework. And there is a scientific way to do this in 3 steps. It's very simple, but it's not easy. And this is where most people are going to throw in the towel and not do it. Number 1 is getting a positive ID. That's number 1. You got to get a positive ID. That's 90% of your cure. This is where the homeowner fails. Time after time after time he says, I've got ants. I've got sugar ants. How many times have I seen the customer call a ghost ant a sugar ant? The ghost ant is not a sugar ant. Tapenomma melanocephalum is not a sugar ant. That ant is omnivorous. It eats lots of things. So understanding what exactly it is that you're dealing with. I've had insects where I've seen them for the first time, an ant, and I'm like, this isn't a big-headed ant. It isn't a fire ant. It isn't a ghost ant. What is it? And until I got a positive ID, I did not make a treatment on that or buy a product or try to solve that problem. Okay? You have to positively ID it and get the scientific name, not the common name. You got to learn to be a professional. And that's the way you're going to get it done. Is when I first started, what I did was I mostly do plants, and a lot of people know me for plant. A lot of people are doing lawns. I don't specialize in lawns. I specialize in plants and understanding. And now you're getting into hundreds of different plants with multiple pest problems, multiple disease problems, and multiple deficiencies. And you wonder why, when you ask me, what time it is, I tell you how to build a clock. Because we're not dealing with just one insect. We're not dealing with, 12 ants, 2 roaches, a couple of occasional invaders, and maybe some silverfish. That's pretty much what the average pest control guy deals with, and then maybe 1 or 2 termites. When you're dealing with plants, you're dealing with a whole lot more that you have to deal with. And when I started out, nobody would tell me anything. Nobody knew. Very few people in South Florida, believe it or not, know anything about plants. They barely know anything about dealing with lawns, because you walk by and you see the signs on the lawns and you see, really, that you're doing that lawn, really? So it's just not, lawn care is just not a great thing. And I don't mean to be disparaging or critical, but I just don't see it. And there's not a lot of people who are an expert. I mean, you can probably count on one hand in South Florida with 2 million people how many people really know about plants. And it's tough. It's really hard. And trying to find a technician, an L&O technician in South Florida that is going to know about plants, that isn't just a chemical applicator that mixes 5 tank products, takes a fungicide, takes an insecticide, takes some liquid fertilizer and put some adjuvant in there, and then, spray everything down and say, I'm an L&O technician. That doesn't make you an L&O technician. If you can't go in and identify diseases, you can't identify pests. If you can't go in and identify weeds, and you can't identify the point source of where these problems are originating from and why they're originating, you're not really an L&O technician. You're a spray tech. And I'm telling you this so that you will go out and you will get the training and get the education that you need to be a true professional. Number 1 is there's 5 things you need to know about that insect. You need to know the order, the suborder, the family, the genus, and the species. You really need to start getting into taxonomy and understanding insect taxonomy. It is vitally important. I got that drilled into me when I took an entomology class at the university. And the teacher made that a point, and then she pointed out why that's vitally important. You really, 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 really need to know that. what I do is I pull a sheet from my local university. Once I have a positive ID, I go and get the taxonomy. I understand that the Tapenomma melacephalum is related to another Tapenomma, but it isn't the same one. And I need to know which one I'm dealing with and which one is in mine. For instance, we don't have odorous house ant, which is another Tapenomma. It isn't here. And we don't have it. So you can get easily confused thinking you've got an odorous house ant when you don't, because it's not here in Miami. The other thing is I pull that sheet from my local university and I learn everything about that ant. I mean, theoretically, what I need to know. All right. Now I need to know the nesting sites. I need to know the harborage sites. Nesting and harborage are two different things. Reproduction, feeding, foraging habits. And I just did one on this ant, ghost ant, and you'll see how many things you really need to know about it. But I will then go into, let's say I'll go into Google Scholar and I'll put the name and the scientific name in there, or I'll go into bio1.org. And in there, I will pull, there's a lot of studies in there that you can pull directly by just going in there. Pull 3 to 10 studies, whatever's available. Sometimes you'll find 3 studies, sometimes you'll find 10, and read them all. Get really familiar with everything about that ant. Then you got to go out into the field and you got to put everything you know about that and the products and the products that have been tested, the active ingredients that have been tested on that ant. All of that will be in the reports. Once you pull that, you say, well, I narrowed it down to about 2 to 3 active ingredients. Then I'm going to narrow it down to do an environmental fate study on that active ingredient. Why? Well, because you need to know how that product is going to behave. How long is it going to last in your environment? So you need to understand how that product behaves in the pH, how that converts it. How long does the half-life of that product? Because you can buy a product that says 90 days, but that 90 days isn't outside. That 90 days could be inside a wall void where it's completely dry, in temperatures of 72 degrees and very little humidity. You need to know the solubility of that product in water. How long is it going to be soluble based on irrigation, rainfall? What is the hydrolysis, the photodegradation, soil degradation? How does it behave on concrete? If you've got areas that you're treating that have concrete, how long is that really going to last? Because you're going to need to know how soon you're going to have to come back and do a follow-up on that. Understanding how it behaves, how many eggs does it produce? Going back to the insect, the biology, how many eggs is that going to produce in the next 30 days? How many eggs does it produce per day? How long does it take for those eggs to hatch? How long is it between the time that the egg is laid and it hatches to the time it becomes an adult and goes through a complete life cycle? All that you need to know in order to be able to select the right product. Once you've narrowed it down to 2 to 3 actives, I would speak to those manufacturers. But now you understand everything about controlling that pest with those active ingredients. Then you can have an intelligent conversation with a manufacturer. I don't talk to my distributor about selecting products. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. Most distributors, they're order takers. They're not experts on every product. There's just too many products that they handle to be an expert on all of them. That I leave to the manufacturer rep. And then I have an intelligent conversation about how to apply that product. What is the best way to apply that product? I think my number one source is the manufacturer. I've said it before. I've said it on this podcast. They know more about how to use their product than anybody else. And once you have 2 to 3 products that you can put into a rotation, you wouldn't settle for one product. That's the mistake everybody makes. You settle for one product. And if you got an insect that has a big problem, you might need 2 to 3 products to control it effectively, not one. So that's why I would talk to all of them. And once I have all that, how long is this going to take? I don't know, an hour, 2 hours of studying? Oh my God, you mean I got to put 2 hours into every insect? Well, let me ask you a question. How much time does a lawyer put into studying a case? How much time does a doctor put into studying a patient? Why do you feel that you're going to get things done in 15 minutes without putting any effort in? That doesn't make you a professional. That makes you a Me Too guy, and this is wondering why people say that they're pest control guy. Why are they worth the money? The good guys, they're worth the money. Guys like me are worth the money because we understand why we can go in there and hit that nail on the head with one tap and drive that nail through that board. And the customer's been trying for 6 months to a year and they can't get it done. We're putting in the time. So guys, I want to thank you. I want 2018 to be a way better year, more educational for you than 2017 was. And we're moving forward. We're putting together a lot of things that you're going to be so excited about that is going to benefit you, especially the tech that's out there that nobody's training and nobody's willing to train. Well, there's a place for you to come and get trained, at least audibly, so that you can have enough to go out there and do things. The second, we're going to be doing lots of things for the individual owner, the small guy, that nobody's willing to do for you. And we're going to get that done. And you're going to stay tuned and see what's coming for 2018. Guys, until next time, you have a great one.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.